Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Marshfield School Committee meeting on Tuesday, January 19th. Mrs. Pazerski, if you could please call the roll.
Mrs. Braid?
Here.
Mrs. Campbell?
Here.
Ms. Boyd?
Here.
Mr. Greer?
Here.
Costello?
Here. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, folks, thank you very much. We have a few important items on our agenda tonight, but before we start the regular meeting, I do have to say that this is the public hearing on the FY22 educational budget. So at this point, if anybody wishes to speak directly on the budget and only the budget for FY22, I invite you to type your name in the chat and you will be recognized in the public hearing for the budget. But first we will need to, I believe, Mr. Granatino, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have a motion to open the public hearing for the budget. Is that correct? I believe yes, sir. Okay, so we're looking for a motion from the members of the committee to open the FY22 budget, educational budget public hearing. Is such a motion on the floor?
So moved.
So moved.
From Mr. Greer, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, 500. Anybody who wishes to speak on the budget, please type your name in the chat and you will be recognized. I'm going to count to 20 in my head. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion from the committee to close the educational budget public hearing session? Is there a motion to close the session? So moved from Mr. Greer. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Boyd. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? 500. Thank you very much, folks. For the first time in a long time, very exciting, we have a spotlight on excellence. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to Mr. Granatino. I am very excited about this spotlight on excellence as it commingles with my day job and my fun job here, as well as a family that I think most people in Marshfield know and a family that I'm lucky enough to know. So Mr. Granatino, we'll go ahead and turn it on over to you to talk about Gino Vitelli and the Vitelli family and their efforts for PANS and PANDAS.
Sure, I will give a brief preview and then I'll turn it over to Gino since he did a lot of the work here on this effort. But I just want to welcome Gino Vitelli, senior at Marshfield High School, his mom and dad, Jen and Mike. He has two brothers, Luca and Salvador. One's at the high school with him and one's down at Ames Way. And this family has been fighting since I got here 5-6 years ago now. I remember Jen reaching out to me to make me aware of PANS and PANDAS, autoimmune deficiency disease. I'm going to let them explain those details a little bit more. But they've been trying to draw attention to this and raise the awareness of this issue since I've been here. And right now, I believe this impacts 1 in every 200 children around the country. So this is not a minor issue that they've been trying to make folks aware of. We learned earlier this month that through their efforts, through the efforts of Gino, his family, and hundreds of people that they reached out to try to raise awareness, that it was announced that the governor, Charlie Baker, signed into law Senate Bill 2984, which includes the PANS insurance mandate and the establishment of PANS Advisory Council. This bill became law on January 1st. And as Gino said in his email to us all who he had been reaching out to, that it was a great way to kick off the new year. Gino has been leading this fight and was one of the keynote speakers earlier this fall at a PANS Panda event that took place at the State House, virtually through the State House. They have taken this challenge on head on and have spoken on behalf of thousands of others who have lived with this disease. Most importantly, during this process, they learned that through the grassroots campaigning, constant outreach to legislative leaders across the state, and doing what they know in their heart is right, they were able to see a bill become a law. This is not something that many folks can say they've done, let alone high school seniors. And I just cannot congratulate them enough on their efforts. And I just wanted to have them have a chance to speak to what's been going on, not just for this past few months, but for the past few years. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Gino and it looks like his mom's there with him and whoever else might be there from the Vitelli family. So you guys are on. You can, I'll unmute you, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much for having me on tonight to speak about the legislation. I'm really honored and quite humbled that you think of me. So, pandas. Pandas is an autoimmune disease that causes brain inflammation and wreaks havoc within you. It's been part of my life for nearly a decade now, since my sudden onset in 3rd grade. However, it was not until recently that I could really talk about it. Honestly, it was this legislative process that really helped me to do that. Anyone that's been through a legislative process realizes it's not just one person, it's a team effort, all of us working together. There are so many steps that took place in order to get the legislation to where it is today. My mom, 5 other parents, and medical professionals locked arms and worked tirelessly to move this bill forward. I personally jumped in with my advocacy when COVID hit last year. The coalition had to get creative in their methods of reaching legislators and people throughout the Commonwealth without the ability to leave homes. So the first action they took was to produce a video. This video had medical testimonies from expert doctors, parent testimonies, representative and senator testimonies, and I thought it would be great if they heard from a patient as well. The video was then shared with the entire House of Representatives and the Senate. It wasn't easy for me to speak so openly about my journey with this disease, but in the end, it was definitely worth it. I realized that by advocating and sharing my story, if I could help another child to not go through what I underwent, then it was well worth it. Next, I worked with James Cuxtis, who wrote a 2-part series on Pandas Pans and the legislation. This series was shared throughout the entire Commonwealth and also shared with the state legislators. I was also one of the keynote speakers at the State House's virtual annual Pandas Pans Awareness Day. I'm proud to share our Awareness Day has been viewed by nearly 20,000 people. Additionally, I sent out hundreds of emails, as you all know, encouraging family, friends, and school faculty to reach out to their state legislators regarding the importance of this legislation. I should mention, along the way, not only were we advocating for the insurance mandate, but additionally, language was added to form a Department of Public Health Pandas Pans Advisory Council. I'm thrilled to share that on January 1st, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law both the insurance mandate and the DPH Pandas Pans Advisory Council. This is the first insurance mandate to pass in 8 years and no less, led by a grassroots effort. As I said before, this was absolutely a team effort. I'd like to give a shout out to my mom and Sheila Gouch, who co-led the coalition, and I want to thank everyone who did their part along the way, whether it was sending an email to a legislator, making a phone call, sharing the newspaper article, or just viewing the Awareness Day, it all mattered. I believe Margaret Mead said it best: never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. I want to thank Marshall Public Schools from Ames Way through the high school, all my teachers, specialists, coaches, and everybody else along the way for always having my back and supporting me and my family with this terrible disease. I would never be in the position I'm in today if it weren't for the efforts of every single one of these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino. I'll turn it now back to the chair, Mr. Costello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino. Thank you, Gino, for that great presentation. As you spoke, I forgot that you were still in high school. So very impressive there as well. Just another thing to add to the list of impressive that you've brought to the table here. Any members of the committee have anything that they would like to say? Ms. Brate.
Hi. Hi, Jen. I see you smiling over there. Gino, it's so good to see you. I have so much to say, but I won't take too much time. That quote that you shared at the end, I'm so glad you said that, because it really is true that everything starts somewhere. And I can't tell you how many times in my life so far I've heard people say, well, you know, that's never going to work. And it's only me. And I'm only going to do this. And I'm just a little bit, and I'm not going to make a difference. And that is so not true. And you are a shining example of that when you put your mind to something and your heart is in it and you want to make a difference, you can. So thank you for being an inspiration to all of us, your fellow students, funny story, your mom's known me for a really long time. Our moms used to work together back in the day, probably before you were born.
No, I worked with your mom.
Oh, so it's so great to see you guys. My best to you and the rest of your family. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brate. Anybody else have something they'd like to add? I see Ms. Campbell, go right ahead.
I do. Well, first of all, Mrs. Vitelli, you must be like the proudest mom ever. I could see you smiling as Gino was talking, and I'm like, oh my God, my mom heart's going to explode. But Gino, I just wanted to thank you for all the hard work you've put in. You mentioned it a little bit, but you've helped to change the lives of so many kids and families across the Commonwealth. And I have to tell you, I did not know a lot about PANS and PANDAS until about a year ago when a good friend of mine who lives in Rhode Island, her daughter was impacted by it. And just hearing all the stories of all of the doctor's visits and the misinformation and not knowing, and it was heartbreaking. And so I'm really, really proud of you, and just know that you've undoubtedly changed the lives of so many kids and so many families. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Anybody else? Ms. Boyd, go right ahead.
Can you hear me? You're going on mute. Well, I've known my neighbors here for a long time, but I couldn't be more proud as well of both of you. Gino, I think what's amazing is how you took something really challenging in your life and you turned it into something that is going to benefit not only kids in this state, but I have no doubt will take on and impact kids across the country as well. I think you've been an incredible role model for our community. You've worked really hard. These laws don't come easy. It's a lot of pounding the pavement. It's a lot of emails, as you said. So I congratulate you on all of that hard work and for sharing your story. And thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Can I just add something? I just have to say thank you to the entire Marshfield School District. It's been a journey for sure. It's been a decade since this, we embarked on this, or this hit our family. And I can tell you undoubtedly, all of you and being embraced from starting with Gino at Ames Way with his teachers, Mr. Campia there, all the way through the high school has made this, I can't say easier, but it has made it easier to have the support from each and every one of you, to have the superintendent be tweeting about PANDAS. Do you know, like, you are a hero, Mr. Granatino, across the state. And I mean that. I would share that with the other parents, like, look what Marshfield put out. And the school nurses sharing about what PANDAS is. So when Gino says that, like, it really takes a village. And it was everyone together that helped us spread the word and awareness. And I, from the bottom of my heart, from not only our family, but all the families that are impacted by PANS, we thank you.
Very welcome.
Well, thank you, folks. And just want to add very quickly before I turn it back on over to Mr. Granatino, that with my day job being in the House of Representatives, as staff for a representative, we see people come in all the time with things that they're pushing for, things that they're advocating for. Dozens of groups, sometimes dozens of groups a week, sometimes dozens of groups a day, pop into your office to give you some information and tell you a certain bill. There's thousands and thousands of bills filed. I have never really seen an advocacy effort like the one that the Vitellis were involved with leading. I'm so thrilled that the bill passed. The one thing for me that makes me sad is that I'm not going to see Jen Vitelli around the halls of the State House as much as I'm used to seeing her. Sincerely, you guys are awesome advocates for it. Gino, you should be, as we said, so proud. And you've learned a lot about advocacy through this. People have learned a lot about advocacy watching what you do. And I think it's appropriate to say that you've probably learned most of what you know about advocacy from the person sitting right there to your right, who poured her heart and soul into this effort because she loves you and your brothers. So you're a lucky kid. You've got a great mom, and you've been a great role model to your brothers and to so many others who have been watching. So we appreciate you guys being here with us and sharing that story. It's awesome to see. We'll say that, we were watching the bill pretty closely, and the night it passed, Jen, you and I texting a little bit how awesome that was, and could just feel through the phone how excited you were. And Just so happy for you guys. So thank you so much for being here. And Mr. Granatino, I'll turn it back over to you, sir, if you have anything else you'd like to add.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much to the entire Vitelli family. Great job. And I'm looking forward to seeing even more advocacy work I'm sure that you guys will be doing down the road. So thank you very much. Just a few other items. Actually, the big one obviously is today was our first day back. We didn't realize I was thinking that way. We had the long weekend, but we actually had the long weekend plus 2 weeks learning remotely and then the holiday break. So it's been a while, and it was great to see students back in school. And as most of you should know now, today was also the first day of our revised hybrid model with more concurrent instruction, more live time. And I just want to say thank you to all of our students, to all of our staff who made today a real great success. It's a lot to ask for everyone to be coming back after such a period of time out, then to be immersed in a whole new approach to the way we're handling the hybrid learning. And from what I saw, I just want to say, again, great job to our staff, great job to our students, and to the folks at home for helping make it work. I know Dr. Martin was out and about as well, checking in some of the classrooms, and I was able to get out there. And obviously, we said even in the letter that went out last week sometime, that there's going to be some hiccups, there's going to be some glitches, but overall, technologically, I think things held up pretty well. We were, obviously, antsy to see how all those folks zooming in were going to be able to maneuver things, and it went without a hitch. I mean, there was a few classes that might have had some delays in getting the Zoom up, or one or two that might have been missed, but overall, that was by far the exception and not the norm. I think the students, the faces of the students, seeing each other when I walked into the classroom and they saw their friends on the board, and vice versa, where they got to see the classroom from home, was obviously a much different approach than what we've been doing. And I think many of the students really enjoyed it. Obviously, it provides a lot more structure to the day for many of the students. And there's a lot of benefits and some trade-offs from what we were doing before. But again, overall, I think we were not only addressing some of the areas of need that we were working on with some of our stakeholders, but we obviously are working towards better addressing the expectations from the state when it comes to live time or Zoom time for learning, more of that direct student learning time. And again, for the first time after being out for the extended period of time, to see it roll out the way it did, I just want to say thank you and congratulations to those teachers who worked really hard to make today a success. And each day it's just going to get better and better and better. And if there were any hiccups, I apologize for them. Those are going to happen, and we try to minimize them. And I think the folks did a great job. I want to send a special thank you and kudos to the folks at Daniel Webster. While everyone's getting all antsy for the first day back and rolling out this new program, they not only had a water main break in the neighborhood behind the school, they also lost their phones and internet at about 7:30. I got a rather panicked email from our director of technology, who was concerned that an hour and a half before school was going to be starting for students, there were no phones and no internet. And at 8:55, we had phones and internet, and we were able to move along. So a lot of people did a lot of hard work to get things ready for today. And as I said earlier, it's going to get better and better each day we have it. Tomorrow we have our first Wednesday, which is going to be a different approach to Wednesdays than we've seen in the past. And again, the teachers did a really nice job sharing schedules, sharing updates. The principals, I want to thank them. Most of them, if they didn't do screencasts, they did some type of major production to help present what the day was going to look like, what the new model is going to look like at their schools. So I'm hoping that helped folks adjust to the new mode of instruction, and we're excited about that moving forward. We'll be talking a little later about some other modes of instruction that we're going to be striving for as well. So that's what I have for the first day. I also want to just read, if I may, and I'll try to read it quickly. I was talking to Chairman Costello and Vice Chair Boyd about a concern that we've had ourselves, but we've heard from our staff, and we know that it's a really tough time when it comes to rolling out the COVID-19 vaccines, and we've had different phases set up. Each state does it differently, as you know, and in our state, our frontline workers, our police, our fire, our medical professionals, those that really need to be vaccinated are up there in phase 1. They moved our school nurses up there as well, which was great. They had previously been in phase 2. But we really are hoping, and again, all of those that are in phase 1 now, we don't want to change that, and they're in the midst of getting their vaccinations. But we also want to see that if there's any way the governor can move forward with getting teachers, administrators, educators, paraprofessionals vaccinated a little sooner than later, that would be great. They're slated for phase 2, which is to begin. They're going to try to begin that in February and go February and March, and hopefully by April have everyone done. But put together a brief letter that we're going to send to the governor, which urges them to see if they can move teachers up a little bit in the vaccine line. Not that they're any more important than other folks who have important jobs, but they are on the front line with our students. We feel it's really important if we want them to be able to do what they need to do with students and vice versa. To have them vaccinated sooner will allow us to do a few more things, especially as we try to roll out more in-person instruction. So we crafted a brief letter today to the governor. It says, on behalf of the Marshfield Public School District and the Marshfield School Committee, we urge you to consider moving our state teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, and educational support staff into the first phase of the COVID-19 vaccination program. We understand the challenges you and your team are faced with rolling out a statewide vaccination program, but we feel strongly that our educators need to be part of the first wave of those being vaccinated. We fully agree that those who have been positioned into the first phase of vaccinations need to be there. They play key roles in combating COVID-19 and keeping our communities safe, and they need to be vaccinated. Our teachers, however, also play a key role in educating close to 1 million children across the state, and each educator is working on a daily basis in close contact with hundreds of students and fellow staff. We are trying to find ways to bring our students back into school for full in-person instruction, and being vaccinated will not only allay a number of the fears that our educators, students, and families have, but it will also help create a healthier learning environment. The sooner our educators can be vaccinated, the sooner we will be able to the sooner we will be able to more comfortably bring students back in for full in-person instruction. Our teachers, administrators, and support staff are working in close proximity with hundreds of students a day, and the least we can do for them would be to make sure that they are vaccinated in quick fashion. We thank you for your consideration of this request. Sincerely, Jeff Granatino, and right now I have Mr. Costello, but I know a few other members have asked to be a part of this. So with the committee's blessing, I can put everyone's name on this letter if you so choose, and we'll CCing it to Lieutenant Governor Polito as well as Commissioner Riley from DESE. So just wanted to throw that out to everybody, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino. Appreciate your initiative with that.
Yeah.
Going to go ahead now and turn it on.
Actually, there's 2 more things. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were
Just
done.
real
Go right
quick.
ahead.
Pool testing, we are still looking at, the state is running a testing program for schools. They asked schools by this past Friday to fill out a survey if they had some interest in this model. It's a little different. It's not that everyone's getting tested, but they're doing a pool testing where they will take groups and everyone will do samples that if anyone in the pool comes back positive, then they'll do further testing to see if anyone in that pool is COVID positive. And they feel it's a quicker, a less expensive way to try to find those who may be COVID positive. There are a lot of moving parts with it though, so it's not a guarantee. They needed to know what assistance we would need as a district to make this happen. Obviously, it's very labor intensive, and a lot of people would be involved. And with our nurses already full out doing what they need to do for our students in dealing with COVID themselves within the community, we need to make sure that we're not overburdening them in that process. So we're going to get more information. I think there was a new update that came out tonight, but we'll learn more about that. And the best part about it is for the first 6 weeks of it, it's actually at no cost to the district, and they provide those that need some of these extra resources to make it happen. The state will be willing to provide that. And then afterwards, after the 6-week period, if we want to continue with it, it would be at various costs that have yet to be determined, but they'll let us know about that. And then finally, sticking to the trend of DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has reached out through their COVID-19 liaison, this woman, Anna Rees-Stronick, who's a great person, works with us a lot as we've made some of the decisions over the past few months as far as when the numbers get high and if we have to make any type of decision to move away from hybrid. We work with Anne Marie, and she made me aware of the state purchasing, or DESE purchasing, a number of air purifiers. We've purchased our own that where needed. We bought 7 of them earlier in the fall to help with our COVID-19 waiting rooms in the nursing stations. Obviously, we don't need them in every room. Our HVAC systems are very sufficient. And so we didn't really have the need to have air purifiers all over the building. But when they threw out the offer to provide us with some free air purifiers, I was not going to turn away from that. So there are some areas in our buildings that may have fewer windows, less ventilation. So the state is providing us with 30 free air purifiers, and we'll be getting those hopefully within the next week or two. And we're going to disperse those across our 7 buildings and across our central administrative office. So we're excited about that. We want to thank DESE. Sometimes they catch some negative thoughts from folks because of things that happen, and that happens in any agency. And I'm sure we fall into that trap sometimes ourselves. But I want to thank them because here they have stepped up and helped our district and provided us with 30 air purifiers that we'll put to good use when we get. So I want to share that with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino. And sorry again for cutting you off. Going to turn it on over now to Dr. Martin. Go right ahead, Dr. Martin.
I just want to reiterate what Mr. Granatino was saying about today. Many, many thanks to our teachers who, have, since they got this news of concurrent teaching, have worked tirelessly to make today work. Also our students and our families who were patient and in waiting for some of the Zooms to start, or some of the kind of the slowness of certain programs, but also Dave Cawthorn, Amy McAlpine, and the innovation specialists and the tech staff were just amazing. They were out and about. They all should have had roller skates on today. They were at every building and making things work. So many thanks to all of them. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. We'll go now to our Director of Special Education, Mrs. Scalaro.
Hi there. I don't have any specific update. I do have an agenda item, so I will speak about that when it comes up.
Great. Thank you very much, Mrs. Scalaro. We are on a roll here, folks. Mr. Miller.
And the same. No updates at this time.
How about that? Okay.
A lot going on, but no updates.
As always. As always. Okay, I see a student representative has joined us tonight, at least one. I don't know if the others are on, but I see Lisa Parsons is here. So Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and recognize you for your update.
Hello. I don't have anything to add to tonight's meeting. I know Haley tried to make it as best she could, but with technical difficulties was not able to join. But yeah, I was on Zoom today, and I didn't have any huge hiccups, and I thought it worked fairly well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That's a helpful update for us to hear. Any subcommittee reports at this time? Nope. Okay. Awesome. Lisa, you don't have to feel obligated to stay for the whole meeting either. We know you've got homework and other things to do, but we appreciate you being on. Thank you so much. We've reached a point of the meeting for public participation. If you are interested in participating in public comment, please type your name in the chat. I see Mrs. Marples typing away. There she is. So once your name is in the chat, that will be the order in which I recognize you. Please type your name in the chat if you'd like to speak. I am going to recognize the newcomer, Sally Marples.
If I'm a newcomer, it's a surprise to me. Sally Marples, President of the Marshfield Education Association. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to the Vitelli family on a very personal level. One of my grandchildren developed a really severe tic, and nobody seemed to know what it was. And their efforts had already been known at the high school. And I said to my daughter, maybe he has strep throat, wasn't running a fever, had no other symptoms. And it turns out that that's exactly what it was. And I was alerted to that by the fact that I had gotten this information because the Vitelli family was being so proactive about it. So on a very personal level, as well as a general level, thank you so much for your efforts. And I am so glad that you were successful. There's nothing worse than having a sick child and not being able to figure out what's going on. So knowledge truly is power, and really helped all of us. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank the administration for making the technology specialists and all the efforts they spent today to make this first day of our like I like to call it, the enhanced hybrid approach that we are now using. I hope it was as successful as we wanted it to be. I need to echo that our teachers have been killing themselves and our specialists to make sure this works. And it's been with the support and the training from the administration that has helped to make this successful. I do want to echo, there will be hiccups. I like to make the comparison. I have now tried to make, I know this is going to sound very odd, a rolled French onion pork roast. And I did my 4th time this Sunday. I finally got it right on the 4th time, right? Sometimes one piece worked and then something else went wrong. And unfortunately, with the combination of live and online and everything else that's gone on, sometimes just like in a regular classroom, everything's going to go smooth. It's going to be great. And then other times you can't figure out what went wrong. It worked yesterday and it's not working today. So please, I ask our parents to be patient. We're doing the best we can. And I find that the students sometimes are very, very understanding, but sometimes the parents forget that teachers are human too. But we keep trying and we'll get there one way or the other. There was one other thing. Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino, for sponsoring that letter to the governor. It is really hard under the present circumstances to decide where people are going to fit on that list, because we all have people or occupations that we know are very important. But I appreciate your being proactive in this way, because I'm sure everybody can understand our faculty and our staff at our schools, many of them feel a tremendous amount of anxiety, not because our kids aren't doing what they're supposed to, but because unfortunately the numbers in Marshfield, not our schools necessarily, but in our community, keep going up. And we still haven't figured out why that's happening. But as I'm sure you can imagine, if you had worked someplace and outside and surrounding you, the numbers kept climbing, 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 you would be anxious about being in that environment. So please, I remind parents and I remind our students, wear your masks. I know it's hard, but our kids can do it in school. We can have an expectation that they'll do it at home and when they're hanging out with their friends. And I know it's hard. I know it's really hard, but that's how we're going to get the numbers down if everybody does what they need to do. So we're all glad to be back. We love being with our students, and hopefully as we go from day to day, this is only going to get better and better. So thank you everyone, and thank you for the time, and please everybody stay safe.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Marples. Appreciate that. You stay safe as well. Moving on now, we have a few items on tonight's agenda, again with the committee's consent. Oh, and I'm sorry, I do see that nobody else has put in for public comment, so I will close the public comment period. With the committee's consent, we will move the approval of the last 2 meeting minutes to the end of the meeting, as we typically do. And we'll move right into the FY22 operating budget. So I'll turn it on over now to you, Mr. Miller.
Do you want me to get this rolling, Tom, while you're working on that?
Yeah, if you could pull up I moved the presentation in to put up just that one screen, but I didn't have a chance to do it. So
I'll pull it up right now. I apologize. I have it in my
yeah, so
phone.
this is the second read. This is a second read for the fiscal 22 operating budget. As Mr. Granatino presented at last week's meeting, the budget right now, through the work that we have done with our town administration, Mr. Moresco and Mr. Della Russo, we right now have a 3% increase scheduled for fiscal 22. That's on top of the $51 million budget for fiscal 21. So this evening, and as presented last week, right now that just puts us in really puts us in just a holding pattern for fiscal 22. As stated last year. Oh, there's the numbers. Thank you, Mr. Granatino.
Yeah.
So right there, the proposed budget is a $1,577,000 increase.
I'm sorry. You there? I'm sorry?
Mr. Miller's Zoom appears to be crashing.
Yeah, I think I'm back.
There you are.
Okay. Yeah, so right there are the numbers. It's a $1,577,000 increase, representing 3%. As stated in the presentation last week, that will basically put us in a holding pattern. Right now, there would be no needs-based enhancements, what we term the financial plan. That $1.5 million would go to any potential salary increases. All our contracts, except for one, are up for next fiscal year. And they would also go to remedying the fiscal deficit that we have in fiscal 21. So there's still a lot in play. I think that last slide, if you can slide down with all the unknowns, so that's the key component right there, because the House budget is still on the table. Circuit breaker is typically in that 75 to 77% range, but we have no there's no guarantee that that's in place for next fiscal year. And the federal grants are a huge portion of this. As I informed the committee last week, we could see up to $1.3 million coming, and there's even talk of another of more funds on top of that. So that would alleviate the deficit for fiscal 21 for the most part, which would put us in a better place for fiscal 22. So as I stated last week, it's a little bit of a backwards process. Usually we're putting a lot of this together up until this point. And then we look through February and March to see, to really work on that financial plan, and as the budget comes together, and see if there's anything we can add. This year, we're starting pretty much from scratch at this point with that 3%, hoping that solidifies the budget for next year. And then as things progress, if the opportunity does arise, we will start to work on that financial plan with the budget subcommittee, Mr. Costello and Ms. Campbell, and then try to start to pull that together as we approach April town meeting. But really sort of a simplified process this year.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Granatino, anything that you'd like to add to that?
I apologize because on that slide, a couple of the numbers were left out. It was an older version, but what Mr. Miller was talking about was going from that $51 million current number to $52,577. The key numbers figured in are he talked about the projected salary increases of about $900,000 is what we have penciled in right now. We had $100,000 for operational increases. Again, some of our contracts that we have, say with bus companies and other resources. We're looking to have to utilize $1 million of our current circuit breaker dollars to help the FY21 projected operational deficit with our COVID costs skyrocketing this year. And then looking at next year to help balance that budget with another $433,000 out of circuit breaker. So that's where we come up with the $52,577. Again, if this changes at all, if it goes to the better, we'll obviously tackle those items on the financial plan that we've been working on and putting in over the last few years. Again, I can't thank the town enough. Mr. Maresco, Mr. Dela Russo, their financial team have been right from the get-go trying to identify what we need and working with us in quick fashion to get us to a point where we can move forward under a very tough financial landscape. As we talked about last meeting, many districts, many communities have had to have layoffs, have had to dial things back quite a bit. We've been able to still move forward, meet the needs that we've identified this year under these really unique circumstances. And be in a position to make sure that our costs are covered for next year. So that's great. And if anything changes down the road, they've been more than willing to say, reach out to them and we'll try to work something out. But we're gonna, look to take this number and make it work and do everything that we can to make sure that we can live within that budget as we have each year.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Granatino.
So you take a vote on the 52.
Okay. Before we move to a vote, I would like to just see if the committee has any questions or comments. And if you do, there we go. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? I do know that we discussed this last time, and so I'm assuming there might not be any, but if there are, we're certainly welcome to entertain those. Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Greer, you have a motion for 52 to approve the FY22 budget of $52,577,000.
So moved.
So moved for the preliminary budget. Sorry about that, Ms. Pazerski, preliminary budget. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. And thanks again to the town for all of their help with making
And
it possible as well.
one other thing, just as you mentioned, the town, Mr. Maresco is doing a budget presentation next Monday evening too on Zoom at the Board of Selectmen. So if anyone's interested, you can tune in then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller again. Mr. Granatino, I'm thinking we just go through the rest of the agenda as it's presented, unless you'd like to move the next item to the end and get the other two out of the way. Up to you, sir. Okay, let's go ahead and do that then. Great. I'll happily move forward with the new business first then, and then we'll come back to the full in-person instruction. The physical restraint policy, policy JKA. Yep, there you go. I'm gonna turn it on over to you now, Mr. Granatino.
Sorry about that. Yeah, on the restraint policy, we have within our school committee policy manual, as you know, yourself and Mr. Greer and I and friends from MASC a couple years ago, redid many of our policies. But since then, some of the language has changed at the state level. They've changed policies and protocols for districts to adhere to. So as we go through our tiered focus monitoring, which is working with the state and looking at our special education department and making sure that we're in line with all the rules and regulations. One of the items came up around the restraint policy, and there have been changes since we last voted our policy, and we just need to make sure that we adapt. We had most of these things in different parts of our policy, but we just needed to kind of do some rearranging. And what Ms. Scalaro and her office has done is take a look at the restraining policy and updated it in a way that better reflects what the state wants us to be doing. They've kind of identified that as something that they want us to have as part of this tiered focus monitoring. So it's a lot of moving of things around that are already there, but I'll let Ms. Scalaro give a brief update on some of the changes. It's a large document. It's I think it was 7 pages. Now it's closer to 10. So while they go through this TFM process, this tiered focus monitoring process, we can be doing work on our end to kind of get ahead of the curve. So if they give it as a formal recommendation, we'll already have it done. So this doesn't have to be voted on tonight. If there's more reading that needs to be done and maybe questions asked or looked up as they go through it, that's fine. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Scalaro so she can kind of give us a Reader's Digest version of what this is all about.
Okay, thank you. So as Superintendent Granatino said, as we're working through our tiered focus monitoring process, as I told you before, we had to upload a lot of documentation regarding various special education and civil rights criteria. And one of the things that came up was to just a suggestion to update our physical restraint and behavior support policy to include all of the changes that came with the January 2016 update into one document. So in January of 2016, the Massachusetts regulations changed. The big things that changed were the use of physical restraint. So they had an updated definition and criteria for implementation. Physical restraints emergency only, never for discipline. There's a timeout definition and criteria for use. Approval from the principal is required. Any kind of seclusion is prohibited. And then also policy and procedural updates for just additional content was required, and then language around approval of timeouts, documentation, reporting criteria, and all of that. So Marshfield updated the policy prior to the January 2016 revisions. However, not all of the information was included in the policy. In procedures, some of it was updated in the policy and some of it was updated in the school handbooks. So we had all of the information. It just wasn't necessarily all in one place, as Superintendent Granatino said. So Dr. Dupuy, when she was in this position, you know, she sent out a detailed email to all MPSD leadership. So everyone is aware of all the changes, and now it's just been recommended that we update the one school committee policy to make sure we have everything in one place. So while I was updating this for you, I reviewed the following. So I looked at our existing policy, which was last updated in January of 2016, the mass regulations, all the information that was compiled by Dr. Dupuy in January of 2016, a sample physical restraint and behavior support policy and procedures, which was provided by the Department of Ed, and sample policies from a handful of towns. So districts do this differently. Some districts have one policy and procedure document, and some districts separate their policies and procedures into two documents. Ours, our existing policy is kind of somewhere in the middle. So we have a lot of the procedures in the current policy, but not all. Some of them were in more detailed in the handbooks. So after looking at all our options, because it is a lengthy, it was 7 pages to begin with, it made the most sense to keep our policy and procedures together. So in order to do this update, I compared our current policy to both the regulations and the sample from the Department of Ed, and made the changes as appropriate. I also consulted with Julie McKinnon, who's our MPSD ASD specialist and our safety care trainer, to make sure that our descriptions and definitions that are in this policy are in line with safety. You may or may not know, the last time it was updated, we were doing CPI, and since then we have switched over to do safety care. So last week, I think in your packet or where the documents you get, you had 2 documents. One was a copy of the existing policy with the edits. So, you know, with the green type is kind of what's new and things crossed out, as well as what the final version of the proposed updated policy would be. So as you can see, it's the bulk of it is wording, very specific wording, and you know, just kind of pulling some things back from the handbook and putting them into the actual policy. I'm not going to go through each part, but you can, as you can see, you know, those methods for preventing student violence and all of that have been added in its entirety. The general de-escalation guidelines have just been put into this one document, and as well as the alternatives to physical restraint. So all of the changes that are here are both, they're consistent with the regulations and with the Department of Ed sample that was provided to me. So I think as you read it, it's self-explanatory as far as the things that were added. And again, all of those definitions that are included of the types of holds and things like that that happen during the methods of physical restraint have all been updated to align with safety. One of the requirements is that there is a specific section on the use of timeout, so that's spelled out, as well as all of the specific requirements for reviewing data and reporting to the principal and the department. So happy to answer any questions. Like as Superintendent Granatino said, you know, it's not necessary that this is approved tonight. You know, if you want to take a minute to read through it, ask questions at the next meeting.
So thank you very much, Mrs. Scalaro. Very much appreciate the thorough explanation, the work that you've done on that. I will just ask the committee, unless anybody else feels very strongly about voting tonight, that we move forward and make this just a first read. That way, if anybody has any specific questions after reading through it again, they can reach out and ask yourself, Mrs. Scalaro, and maybe Ms. Brayton and I, as the members of the policy subcommittee, can just take a quick look at the rest of the policies and make sure that everything's in line with that, and maybe hop on the phone with yourself, Mrs. Scalaro, and Mr. Granatino sometime in the next week or so, and just for a quick 15-20 minutes, just to review it for a third time and make sure everything is okay. I do have one quick question. Is that language on timeout policy, does that apply to school committee members? Is it like if I wanted to put Mr. Greer on timeout, would I be allowed to do that? Hypothetically, right. So if the rest of the committee, though, all jokes aside, is okay with that, Ms. Braid, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I do have one question, and this kind of sparked another question while I was reading over this. So I know that I might not get an answer right now, and that's totally fine. But in the beginning of this, I see that it says all staff faculty will receive training regarding the school's policy. And then employees hired after the school year begins will receive training within 1 month of starting their employment. So I guess my question is, does this apply to substitutes? And with having COVID right now and so many new people in and out of the building, are you guys changing your training policies for staff, not only for this, but for other stuff too?
Can I answer that, Jeff? Or would you like me to?
Yeah, I mean, you can jump in. I mean, we do present a lot. We've tried to automate a lot of this information so folks can, whether it's through PowerPoints, through screencasts, they can pick up some of this information if they join us late in the school year.
Right.
Obviously, if we have to make everybody aware of it, we utilize our principals, and whether it's through faculty meeting time, they might update them on some of the changes, or give them a screencast with this information so that they can get better familiarized with it. But Ms. Scalaro, anything else I'm missing there?
Right. Yeah. So every year we put on an annual compliance training, and the physical restraint policy is part of that. So there is a PowerPoint presentation as well as a riveting screencast that goes along with the PowerPoint. So that's done at every school at the beginning of the school year, and that as well, Erica Barrett also has that, and she is aware that new employees need to be trained within 1 month of the school. So we've done it so that it's available in Aspen. It stays in Aspen, so all employees can reference it at any point as well, and they provide electronic signatures in Aspen that everyone's received the compliance training.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Campbell, go right ahead.
Hi, Mrs. Scalaro, I just had one question. On I think it was page 4, I think at the top, it's about notification, and it talks about notifying the parents, and it says within a 24-hour period. I think as soon as possible was the language that used to be there, and then it was changed to 24 hours. I'm just wondering if there's a way, and maybe there isn't, but to make it not 24 hours. I'm imagining like if something ever happened at school and a child comes home and tells their parent about something that had happened at school before the school is able to notify the parents, if there's a way to sort of avoid a situation like that from happening. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So it's a matter of just having to reach out to the parents within 24 hours. And that is the language that's in both the regulations and in the example from the Department of Ed. Okay. But I will definitely, I will look at that and look at other policies prior to the next meeting. But it's, it's a matter of reaching out via telephone, via email, via just making that connection within 24 hours. But part of the updates with the new policy really had a lot to do with like reporting requirements, timelines, getting approval from principals, filling out form, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add that I would gather that anytime any type of restraint had to be used, that contact is going to be much quicker than 24 hours. Again, this
That's
is
what
the
I would
state
assume too.
regulation,
Yeah.
but I think we could maybe tweak it and just add that while all attempts will be able to be made, contact to be made as soon as possible after the
Yeah.
event. Per state regulation, families will be notified no later than 24 hours. But I
Okay.
think anytime that's happened, to your point, that contact has been made much quicker than 24 hours.
I'm
So
sure,
I
I'm
believe
sure
along
that's
with
the
that.
intention, but I was just
Yeah.
looking at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just imagining like parents hearing from kids about a situation like this happening at school. And
No, before they get home, we want that parent to know.
Right.
And that's what typically happens. So, but I see your point, and we might be able to tweak that a little bit.
Yeah, and this is
Thank you.
very rare, you know, this physical restraint is used as a last resort. All those other things are put in place prior to there ever being physical. So I will look into that.
Great. Any further questions? Thank you. And that question, Ms. Campbell, is exactly what I think Ms. Bright and I should take some time and go over. I'm sure Mr. Granatino, what you just said is a nice addition to that. So that's a nice catch, Ms. Campbell. So thank you again, Mr. Greer. Mr. Greer, go right
I
ahead.
just want to say I get some edits I want to suggest to this, and I'm on board with the intent of what we're doing here. I just want to make sure that we're not letting some policy items bleed into some procedural items bleed into the policy, and then a couple words here and there. Like I hate the word all because you can't comply with all, things like that. But just some minor edits that I want to suggest.
I do have flashbacks to our going through all of the policies together and you complaining about that. So I appreciate that consistency. But so yeah, if you'd like to, Mr. Greer, maybe probably the best way to do it is send Mrs. Scalaro an email with some questions you may have and just suggested clarifications, and Mrs. Scalaro, yourself, myself, and Ms. Bright, Mr. Granatino can go over those at some point.
Yes, and this document is combining the policies and the procedures. That's one of the, so it is definitely a very comprehensive policy and procedure document, but part of that is, it's all in one place. This is it. We have it all right here, which I think is a lot of ways, but I'm happy to talk with whomever and make edits and changes as appropriate.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scalaro. Appreciate your work on that. If there's no further questions at this point, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is Student Opportunity Plan. I'll go ahead and turn it on over to you, Mr. Granatino.
All right, I'll have Dr. Martin walk us briefly through this, but again, the Student Opportunity Act was passed by the legislature back in 2019, and it calls for all districts to spend resources focused on closing opportunity and achievement gaps. As part of the SOA, districts are required to submit a 3-year evidence-based plan aimed at closing persistent disparities in achievement among student subgroups. So, Dr. Martin, although we did not receive a ton of money through this Student Opportunity Plan, we still had to show them what we're doing to reach these students. So Dr. Martin's going to kind of walk us briefly through the steps that we're taking on this plan and what we'll have to be submitting to the state, and they'll be monitoring as we move forward.
So yes, the act was passed in 2019. So the Department of Ed has asked every district to create this 3-year student opportunity plan. So I did upload the full document, the full plan in the folder, but basically it asks us to identify a subgroup that we want to focus on. So like many instances, we are focusing on the high needs subgroup because it covers the majority of our students who are the neediest. So that is the subgroup that we are focusing on. Basically, they are asking to work on a few different categories, but they want you only to focus on one. And it was clear that they want you to focus on something that either you've already started to implement and you're refining, or something that you're planning to implement or build on in the next 3 years. So one of the choices, and this is the one that we have written the plan about, is on improving the literacy skills of our early learners, so our elementary students. So basically, what we have written into the plan is really developing phonic awareness or phonemic awareness and phonics, as well as students' reading and writing skills. We started the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system at the elementary level several years ago to progress monitor to assess our kids on both their fluency and their comprehension skills. We've also worked, as you know, over the past several years on Readers Workshop, Writers Workshop. And then last year we started implementing foundations for K-2. So that is all really part of the plan of focusing in on the literacy skills for elementary students. So written into the plan, even though, as Mr. Granatino said, it's not really part of this additional funding, we did write it into the plan because it is part of meeting this plan for our district. So we put in for our reading specialists because they are a really important part of this initiative. And then our training, we put in the units of study, all of the resources. This year we were able to get virtual units of study for our teachers for the writing units so that they had something to kind of be a model for them as far as doing some of their screencasts and their writing unit lessons, especially virtually with our students. And then the foundations materials this year, especially, we purchased materials for all of our kids that are at home, remote learning, and also our hybrid students for when they are home, we purchased additional home kits. So all of that was written into the plan. And then they just ask for you to identify metrics that you're going to use. So basically we would be using, of course, our ELA student growth percentile and our MCAS scores, but also our benchmark assessment system scores, our foundations assessments that's built into the program. So all of that is really part of this plan. So what they ask is that our school committee votes on the plan to accept it. And so that is why it's being brought forth this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Any questions or comments from the committee at this time? Ms. Boyd?
Yes, I think my only question is, do we have a sense of what the state does with the information? Is it used? Is it more sort of retroactive that they've provided us with some funding and now we're documenting for them what we plan to do with it? Or is it used to inform future funding decisions in upcoming budgets?
They really are looking for us to ensure that we're spending our money, whether it's their, additional money or what we have in our operating budget, really spending our money on closing the gaps of achievement. So it is a 3-year plan. So the budget that we put in here is only for this fiscal year. And then I'm assuming we will have to update them as we go along for the next 2 years. So I think they're just looking to make sure that every district is focused on some of their subgroups.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, you do need this approved. So if there's a motion on the floor, we'll gladly accept that motion at this time for the approval of the Student Opportunity Plan. Ms. Boyd, I see you've unmuted yourself. So moved from Ms. Boyd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. One would be Mr. Greer, as he had to just step out for just a moment. So that is a 4-0-1 vote. Thank you very much. We are going to move into the final agenda item of the night, the full in-person instruction. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over now to you, Mr. Granatino, to give some more background information on that, which I know is a continuing discussion from our last meeting.
Just sharing a screen here, 1 second. All right, so with the help of Mr. Miller, we'll walk through this. This is a follow-up to what we had at the last meeting Oh, good. Where we looked at what it would take for our schools to move to fully in person. Obviously, we've been focused on our hybrid model and our alternate remote model for our elementary and secondary students. But at the back of everyone's mind throughout the year has been, when can we get our students back in person? And we tasked the facilities group to look at what it would take, kind of from a mathematical equation of what it would take to get students to be able to fit into the classrooms with some of the metrics that we've been tasked with adhering to over the course of the year to date. So that's what we talked a lot about at the last meeting. Now we're trying to see what we could actually bring forward as a transition plan for bringing everybody back in person. At this time, we can't bring everybody, all 3,900 students back into the buildings at once, but there is some thoughts here that we have as far as how we could transition it in, and I want to share it with the committee and obviously have a discussion with the committee and decide, if we want to go down this path, if we want to go down a different path. The floor will be open, but moving in again in this initial phase, as far as trying to get students to full in person, we're working to introduce elementary students back to full-time instruction, adhering to the 6-foot distancing. We talked a lot last week about the fact that all but a couple classes at the elementary level could be brought back in without any major changes right now to setups in the classrooms. Again, we've used the 6-foot CDC standard to keep students distanced from one another and from staff as best we can. And what we're looking at here, and we'll walk you through it, is a two-pronged phase of reintroducing them to bring our K-2 students back fully in person on February 8th. And that's the week prior to February vacation, and then follow up with our students in grades 3 to 5 returning the week after February vacation, February 22nd. This is just a little breakdown of the classes so you have an idea at each level. Our Amesway students in K1 and 2, you see the number of students that they have per class, and roughly we're looking at about 20 students that can fit in. Anywhere from 15 to 20 is the average in these elementary classrooms. Some are set up a little different, where we could fit them in at 6 feet and not have to make any real modifications. Governor Winslow, our K and 1s would fit fine within their 6-foot range, but we do have the setup of the grade 2 classrooms is a little different. And so we have some that are kind of teetering on being over the expectations a little bit for the 6-foot distancing. Daniel Webster, their kindergarten session, their classes could fit, I think they're around 18 a class, 19 a class, and they're at 20 and 21. So they're a little bit over as well. Not much, and I think these are some things that we can work on. We've already had some discussions with the union on this, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue to have good talks on that front to make this work. But grade 1 and 2 with the Daniel Webster, we have 17 and 18 per class and 16 and 16 at the grade 2. So we feel pretty comfortable we could bring them back in. And then South River, with the setup for the K1 and 2, we could bring those folks back at 6 feet with those students per class. Now, again, the one caveat is we have a number of students out, obviously about 150, 160 students that are out in fully remote, our alternative remote program at the elementary level. We have about a corresponding number similar to that at the secondary level. So if there's a major shift into back into the elementary when we go fully in person, that could change things around a little bit, but based on the numbers, and we've been updating these numbers on a daily basis, and we've been getting feedback from our families, as we talk about moving forward from the 22nd, because that was kind of the date that we had set as, okay, if we're going to make a change, we need to know by the 22nd. And the folks that have been letting us know that they want to return to fully in person is pretty much up to date to today, I think. I think we made some tweaks to it there. So these numbers reflect those changes. Martinson, K1 and 2, there are really no concerns as far as being able to fit those students in grades K1 and 2 at the 6-foot level. When you get to grades 3 through 5, I should say, Amesway has a bit of a bubble based on their sizes in grade 4, but grade 3 and 5, we could probably transition them in without an issue. Governor Winslow, grades 3, 4, and 5, we could transition those students in based on the numbers there, as well as Daniel Webster, grades 3, 4, and 5, while keeping the 6-foot distancing. So some of the things that we could do besides, and what we're trying to avoid is those 4 situations where we have a few students over that if you brought them back and you might go from 6 feet distancing to 5 feet distancing, or you might have everybody still at 6 feet distancing, but you're going to have 2 or 3 students that might be 5.5 feet distance. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at whether we could move rooms, you know, where there's a smaller group of students in one room that could fit more students, we just flip them. So if we're at a room that could fit 20 and there's only 13 students in that class or 14 students, and the one that's tight at 20, we just move the room. And again, we want to minimize moves at all costs, but if it's the choice of moving a room or having to break up a class so you could fit more students in, that would be the last thing we'd want to do. And especially where there's only four areas where this is an issue, I think we'd like to try to make it work with our existing space. And if worst case scenario, if we have to go below 6 a little bit, work that out with Ms. Marples and the union to see that can be done without any major changes. So that's what we're looking at on those levels. And again, I'm sorry, I left out South River School. 3, 4, and 5 are not an issue as far as fitting them in at 6 feet. And at Martinson, the only tight spot would be in grade 4, where they have 3 classes of 2020 and 21. Again, there's some rooms there that we might be able to flip around to help that situation as well. So again, this was discussed last week, and Tom, feel free to jump in. He felt pretty confident. The group of the facilities task force felt confident that, you know, using the classrooms and the existing classrooms and the cafeterias, that 6 feet distancing could still take place for lunches for all of the students if they were in. And with the caveat that at Martinson, there might be a little additional seating needed. And Tom, where is that additional seating needed?
That's the lunchroom.
The lunchroom.
Yes.
Okay. So we'd have to get a little creative there to make that happen. The transportation, I'm not going to go through that analysis again there. That's folks can check that out if they'd like, but I believe we can make it happen with our bus routes. Worst case, we may add a few routes or tweak a few routes to make it work.
I spent some quality time with Ms. Stotman from our transportation provider, and she's worked through the numbers, and we would have to add routes, adjust some routes, but right now we would reasonably be able to transport all the students that are currently being transported. The one caveat here is if families were to start adding their students back onto the buses, it may become a little bit tight, but we'll make it work either way. Again, we do only legally have to provide transportation for students from K to 5 outside of 2 miles. So that's where we stand on as far as transportation goes.
Again, if you're looking at worst case scenarios, if we had to, might have to limit some of the transportation that we've provided within that, those metrics that the state asks us to follow as a mandate, that K to 5 beyond 2. One other thing I wanted to show here is that, you know, with COVID cases, and I know a lot of the folks, you know, look at the metrics and, you know, where are the predominant number of cases, and this is kind of part of the rationale as well about why we're looking at elementary first before we go secondary. The numbers of positive cases over the course of the year, and this is updated through yesterday. At the K to 2 level, we're looking at a little over 10% of the cases overall for students, and about 20% 3 to 5. So we have about a third, a little less than a third of all the cases at the K to 5 level. So that's why we kind of feel that we would want to start with them, besides the fact that we have the spacing in all but 4 or 5 of the classes to make it happen. There's a smaller number, and we're hoping that number is going to get smaller and smaller as we move forward. And obviously the vaccine will have a factor in this as well down the road. But we have 30% in our grades 6 through 8, as well as just under 40% at the high school level. So I know one of the members had asked about that information last week. So the recommendations that had come forward by the task force originally was to have elementary return at all grades targeted 6 feet distance full time, initially 4 days per week. We're going to still at this time keep the remote half day Wednesday through, you know, until we get things rolling to meet the changes in instructional time required by DESE. The middle school and high school, we'd be looking to phase in those approaches, operating within the state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distancing for teachers pending completion of action items, as well as returning at the high school, all students operating within state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distancing for teachers date to be determined there as well. But we have some dates actually that we want to throw out as a possible transition. But anything at the secondary level, we felt pretty strongly, and I know the task force had talked about it as well, as trying to make it work with our high school seniors first and foremost, and say the ones that have lost the most over the last year and a half. And we're trying to have them have a semblance of a senior spring that they could walk away with. So that being said, just an update again for the committee. When we look at going below, we talk about the 6-foot distancing. This is something that we've come into agreement with when we put our plan together to reopen the school year with our union members. Very similar to districts across the state as far as adhering to 6 feet seat-to-seat distancing across the district. And we added that if and when it is deemed appropriate to do so with the health official recommendations, the district will reduce the distance between seats. So we have the latitude to bring those seat distances down, but it has to be based on health official recommendations. And while we're within the hybrid, the committee will negotiate over any decision to reduce the distance between seats in advance. So again, we're just different here because we're looking at making this the in-person model. So that part, I just want to throw that language out there because this is what we had brought forth at the beginning of the school year. But we can reduce the distance of our seats with health official recommendations. So to make it work at the secondary level, this is what we would have to have in place. What we're looking at for the secondary phase, so the initial phase is for elementary, again, the week before February vacation and the week after. In grades 12, we'd be looking to try to bring them in fully in person no later than March 1st. And again, if these are all dates we put down, they can change if we're able to do so. But right now we're looking at grades 12 being transitioned in March 1st. We're looking at grade 6, which we felt was of the middle school 3 classes, the one that we had the most ability to bring back in person sooner than the others. And then that would be March 15th with April 5 as a target date for transitioning all of the rest of the middle school students. And then April 12th, the week before April vacation, the date to try to transition in our 9 through 11 students fully in person. What needs to be addressed obviously is the 6 feet distancing. 6 feet is the CDC distancing that we've used as well as others across the state. The 3 feet distancing is DESE's requirement or recommendation that you can go down to 3 feet. Some districts have done that. Others have held to the 6 foot distancing from the CDC. We're looking at 15 students per room roughly at the high school. Other than science, that would get us at 6 feet. And then Furnace Brook ranges anywhere from 13 students to 20 students in a room. So we have to try to tackle that issue. And this is something that the task force had been working on and working with the folks at the middle school and the high school to try to see how we could get more bodies in those rooms. And again, it's gonna need us to probably go below that 6 foot distancing. So that's the biggest challenge there. Transportation at the middle school, Mr. Miller can talk a little bit about that. We're probably going to have double routes because that's our largest number of riders are at the middle school. And to be able to fit, if everyone came back in and we had all the students in there, everyone riding on the buses would not be feasible in the one route unless the state changes their recommendations on distancing in the buses. Right now, they have it at every 3 feet for distancing. They did give some language though that once some of the metrics change, I think Tom added it in the next slide, they'll have new information on how we can distance ourselves on the buses. Obviously lunches will have to be addressed, but I think those are doable, as well as when you get to the bigger schools, the distancing in the hallways. If you had 1,000+ students, those are just things that we'd have to monitor internally, but obviously things that we could do. And then vaccinations, not that we have any control over that, but that's just obviously plays a factor, I think, in making folks feel more at ease as we move back to in-person instruction. The middle school solutions, again, these are from previous slides. I'll just go through them quickly. Rescheduling for the second semester to help balance the class sizes out to meet the state guidelines. That's ongoing right now at the middle school. Targeting the 6 feet distance for students, unless we can make some changes there, as well as guaranteeing the 6 foot distancing for teachers. After rescheduling, we think that as far as feeding students at the middle school, we'll be able to find a way to best meet the needs of those students with more of them in place, with a little tinkering at the school. That's going to be one of the bigger challenges. But again, nothing like that is something that can't be solved over time. And if we have a little time before they are all back fully in person, we'll be able to work that out. Again, the transportation, in order to provide transportation for all students at the middle school, if they were all to be back, riding buses in the hybrid model, implement a two-tier busing system and drop-off pickup by current cohort. DESE said transportation guidance is to be revised later in the spring after vaccine is out and incidents decline. So until later in the spring, they're still gonna, it looks like they're gonna be holding us by this language, Mr. Miller, to the 3-foot distancing on the buses. So that's what might cause us to have the double routes. And then at the high school, how do we get all the students back in? Again, operating with the state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distance for teachers. The focus is on returning seniors to class first and foremost. But again, we're going to have to work on that 3-foot distancing or the 6-foot distancing to make that a feasible option for us to be able to get back in person there. Feeding them, again, adjusting to early dismissal is a possibility on the one of the solutions that the task force came up with before, as well as lunches provided to students to take home at dismissal. These are things that were discussed last week. I think if we had everybody in person, though, we would probably have to, find some other ways in which to make this work a little bit more efficiently. Transporting students, it will not be as big an issue at the high school because there's just fewer folks riding the buses. So, we'd have more cars in the lots and we can make that happen. Obviously, we have the space allotted for that. But the transportation issue via buses are not going to be a huge issue at the high school level. So that's where we're at. Again, we went through it quickly. The dates are dates that we were asked to come up with some dates in which we think we could do this. We feel confident that we could do the elementary levels with the 6-foot distancing sooner than later. And I think rolling it out, many of the districts around us are looking at February as the time to roll out some of these programs to bring students back fully in person. And we're looking at March into April as the time for the secondary transition. But again, that's up for discussion, and we want to kind of throw this out for the group to take a look at. And if we want to move forward, obviously with the first phase, we want to be able to share that with folks in case there are going to be any changes on folks that want to move to any type of alternate remote educational programming. So Tom, anything I left out there? I went through it quickly, but.
No, I don't believe so. I think that's pretty much sums it up. We are pretty confident we can get the kindergarten through 5th grade back in full at the 6 feet target. So then there's still obviously some work to be done at the middle school and high school levels. We're looking at all avenues to get our students back in as much in-person time as possible.
Okay, well, thank you both for that presentation. I'm sure the members of the committee have questions and comments that they'd like to make. Before though, I just want to very quickly say, obviously a lot of work goes into planning like this. We know it's something that's been on your mind for a little while, something that you've been putting together a plan for. What obviously motivates me and what I know motivates all of us is making sure that our children are getting the best possible education. And I've been hearing from a lot of parents who, are dismayed at the fact that, and obviously it's the fault of nobody here, that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and their kids, especially at the lower elementary levels, are missing out on important in-person instruction with their teachers, and that kind of interaction that's so important to social emotional growth at such a young formative age. I'm encouraged by the fact that our teachers and our staff have done a fantastic job implementing the social distancing guidelines that were set forward and making sure that every student and staff member is safe in those buildings, as safe as humanly possible during a time like this. We have a very low rate of transmission in the schools, Mr. Granatino, as you've noted a few times. I think only a couple of cases we believe were even transmitted in the schools, if that, throughout the entire course of the pandemic. Despite our high numbers, those seem to be transmitted through outside activities. So that's very encouraging that our social distancing protocols in schools are working. I'm encouraged by the fact that I know, Mr. Granatino, you mentioned speaking with our district physician. I had a conversation this weekend with the chairman of the Board of Health, who would support an initiative like this as well. And I know you had that same conversation. That is encouraging. It's especially encouraging to see medical professionals like that say it's actually better for kids to be in school full time right now when possible, at this safe kind of distance, because when they're out of school, that's when the spread is happening. That's when, when they're not following these strict protocols that are in place in the schools. So when they're in the school buildings 4 or 5 days a week, they're actually safer because we're doing a good job implementing those protocols. So those are all the things that encourage me during this. I'm interested to hear what the rest of the committee feels, the discussion that will occur over that. But that's just some of the reasoning behind my thinking right now. And Mr. Granatino, I see you unmuted if you had anything to add to that. Or
No, I was going to follow up on your discussion about the being safe to be in school. I know there was a lot of discussion about that over the weekend when I made the decision to come back from remote, even though there was some numbers that were high in the community. But Dr. Irons, as you alluded to, feels strongly, as does, I had conversations with Mr. McDonald as well from the Board of Health, and that, again, with the rituals that we've established in school, the distancing, the mask wearing, all of those protocols, we've been able to keep numbers down in school. Only 3 cases transmitted within school out of over 200 now. So, I understand that there's concerns that folks may have when they see us talking about coming back in person with things that are still going on, but we're confident that those numbers are going to be coming down for our students and staff safe when they are in school, whether it's in the hybrid model or whether it's back when we're fully in person. We're excited to try to get to that position, as are many of the districts across the state.
Right. And I think that's important to note too, is that other districts are starting to move in this direction as well. Our timing seems to coincide nicely with their timing. So I do have one question before I turn it over to the rest of the committee, is the splitting up the K to 2 and 3 to 5 return. Could you just briefly explain the rationale between before not having them come back at the same time, and splitting those into 2 separate groups?
Couple parts, just I guess to be able to have everybody come back in at once, I think would be a big paradigm shift for the schools to handle. I mean, we've seen the changes that occur when you go from hybrid to remote, and from remote back to hybrid, or in this case, a revised hybrid. But in looking at K to 2 being obviously the smallest number of incidents across the school year as well, we figured we'd start with them, have the week break to kind of readjust and see, how things went, and then bring back the other group of students 3 to 5 the following week. And so within, less than a month, within 3 weeks, we're going to have them back. But we just figured that bringing them all back at once, it might be a bit much for the system to handle, the schools to handle. And so we wanted to ease in and that transitioning. And that's the model that a lot of the districts around us are looking to do as well. Not that we always have to do what our peers do, but it is something that folks are finding is a more safe way to do it, I guess, doing it in part there. So we bring K to 2 back for a week. They'd have a week off. Then we bring back our 3 to 5 along with them. So by the end of February, we'd have the entire elementary levels back fully in person.
Great. I appreciate that explanation. And then the only other question I had is March 1 for the senior class, and I'm glad we're all in agreement, at least you and I know Mr. Greer had asked about it as well. The senior class being the first of the high school to come back, I think is a very good thing. Just wondering why the rationale for March 1st, and I know you've said it before, if you could just reiterate, there is a possibility of us doing things sooner if
Yeah, I mean, I said that, and I think we were looking at a way to phase in all levels, and again, to do it all at once, it would be a big challenge, I think, for any district to try to bring them all in at once. And we're not talking about all of them in, but with the seniors, again, we still have a lot of work to do on the distancing, and we got to try to figure out how we're going to handle that. And that might not be ready for us in early mid-February. And I think there may be some other factors at play that allow for us to make some changes to distancing without the concerns, whether it's more vaccinations at that point in time. But we just felt that the focus should be first and foremost with the elementary students, with the smaller numbers and the more ease at fitting them in at 6 feet. And then if we have to move to the next level and try to alter that 6 feet distancing, it might not be able to do that till March 1st. If we can do it sooner than that, I'm not opposed to it. But I just think we were asked to kind of come up with some dates where we could transition in, and we felt that was the best date at this time. And if that changes, then I'm all ears.
Great, appreciate that, and am inclined to support the timeline that you had presented, but want to hear from the rest of the committee on what they have to say. So if anybody has any questions, comments, Ms. Campbell, I'll go right ahead and recognize you.
Thank you. I just have two short comments and then one question, but I mentioned this the last time we talked about it in looking at some of the elementary classes that were a little bit on the larger side. And I noted before, and I just want to say it again, like if at all possible, and I know this is what we would do anyways, but to not have to move kids from a teacher that they've had all year. We've talked so much about consistency for our kids and how it's so important. I just feel like that would be the absolute worst case as a fourth grade Martinson mom, like full disclosure, like the worst case scenario, I think, for our teachers and our students to be separated from one another after, you know, the only consistent thing I think has been that teacher-student relationship. So that was just one thing I wanted to say. The other, and Sean, you touched on it a little bit in talking about the K-2, 3 to 5 kind of going in at different times, which I totally understand and support. And also acknowledge that it's really just for a week, that it would be kind of two separate things, but giving those kids that do, the 3 to 5 kids that do have younger siblings that would be starting school, they're going to need a little bit of a grace period. If you've got single parents that have to be dropping off a K-2er and at home with a 3 to 5er at the same time. It's not always possible to do. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
And then my question really is, I know, you know, right now, if kids are exposed or if they travel and they come back and have to quarantine from school for a little while, it's pretty seamless for them to hop on and be able to do the remote work from home. When our kids, you know, go back fully in school, if, for example, let's say a family travels over February break and when they return home, they're not supposed to go back to school for X amount of days. What does that look like for them in terms of their schoolwork? If there's not the Zooming wouldn't presumably be going on anymore because all kids are back in school. So what does that look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good
asking?
question.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been talking about that's one of the things that's still in the works as far as trying to find the best way to do it. I mean, obviously, as you alluded to, if we're fully back in person, it's you know, we're not going to have that Zooming in aspect of it. We can take a look though at that and see if that's something that we might have to continue with to a certain degree. But our hope is that folks are, you know, going to be in school, that, you know, if there are those expectations for travel to not occur that's going to impact school, I mean, that would be, I guess, our number one goal, that folks adhere to that so they don't have to quarantine for 10 or 15 days, 14 days. But if they did, I mean, we are still looking at that and decide, you know, we haven't yet decided if that's going to be an option that we're going to go rolling forward with. Obviously, while we're in hybrid, that's something that it's a little bit more attainable.
Right, it's already it's already happening. But.
Fully in person, I don't have that answer just yet for you, but I'd say by the next meeting, we will have that ironed out for you.
Okay, and then the only other, I guess, question or comment, and I think I had mentioned it before, was looking at, I know Martinson specifically, and I'm sure other elementary schools, the drop-off is challenging right now with half of the students. And so just trying to be really strategic, whether it's using our school resource officers or some other type of resource to help that transition to now having potentially everyone back in school, and what that's going to look like in the mornings for drop-off.
Yeah, we would work with the Marshall Police Department. They've been great, and obviously with a few more resource officers. I know Mr. Hernan's here with us right now, so they're well vested in this process, and will use their expertise to help us come up with some of those plans. Again, that's going to be something that might be a bit of a headache, but again, we're trying to weigh the options of what's, you know, we know it's going to be a challenge, but what's the goal? If it's
the benefit's better than the of course.
So
but
we
just,
still have to do it safely, and we've had some issues where you know, drop-offs have been a challenge with even half the students with cars. But I think that's something that we can use our friends at the police department to try to work out a plan that will address that.
Awesome.
So that's a great question.
That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would just go back to the comment about not wanting to separate students. We don't want to do that. I know the teachers in those classes do not want to do that. And so we're in talking with some of our union leaders. You know, I think that's something that we're going to try to work out without having to make any major changes there.
No, thank you. I appreciate the timeline, and I know I'm excited for my kids to get back to school. I know they're excited to get back to school and see their friends. So that's it. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Boyd.
I first I really want to sort of underscore Ms. Campbell's point about I think the need to have a plan for any student that might have to quarantine for, 10 days. Travel is one thing that can be avoided, but through no fault of their own, people can get a call and have had an exposure and need to stay home and quarantine. And I don't want anyone to be making a choice, and feeling like they don't have an option to stay home and just sort of missing 2 weeks of school I think we should have a plan for those scenarios. I guess my only other question is, it's really not so much intended as it is at DESE, and I'm curious if we have or can find out like their rationale for the 3 feet distancing. I just don't feel like I have a good answer if someone asks me, why not 6 feet? Like that's what you hear everywhere. DESE says 3 feet. Why does DESE say 3 feet? Like what is their rationale? And I would just like to have that understanding of what their rationale is for that.
I agree with you. That's a great question. And again, I think when we were putting the plans together originally back in July and into early August, it was 6 feet across the board and going by CDC standards. And then as we were getting closer to September, they made the revision to say that you could go to 3 feet if you wanted to. And I don't know what their rationale is behind it. I think it was mainly a chance to try to get more students in the building, which I get, we all want that. But I know CDC has their expectation of 6 feet, and they've explained what that means. And DESE has it at 3, but that obviously raises concerns with some who don't feel that it's a medically based decision. But there's many people that are very comfortable with that, and there are some districts that have gone down to 3 or 4 or 5 feet. So I think that there is some wiggle room there, but we just need to, as you allude to, Ms. Boyd, have a better understanding about what that 3 feet is, why it's allowed by DESE. So it's not a question that's been answered yet to many of the school leaders, but we can try to find out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Ms. Brate, I see you've unmuted yourself. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Sean. I just wanted to address Kendra's point really quick. Kendra, I was in, and for everybody else too, I was in the elementary group when we first started this. And one of the big concerns was not having any kids move. We did have quite a few members of the leadership team in that group as well. So I'm confident that we'll be able to not have that be the case moving forward, just to give you a little bit more info on that. I totally agree with you on the pickup and drop off, but again, I agree that we have the best resources for that, so we'll be able to figure that out. And then one thing that I didn't hear you mention, Mr. Granatino, tonight is that we do have a school physician, and I think that that's an important piece of this, that we aren't just flying by the seat of our pants making these decisions, on our own. We rely on medical professionals to share with us the trends that are going on, not only, in the Commonwealth, but across the world in regards to returning to school with COVID. And a lot of studies show that kids are safer in school than they are at home. So I just wanted to make note of that and mention that we do have someone working with us that is a pediatrician. So we are taking some of our cues from him. Thank
Definitely.
you.
Yeah, no, Dr. Ryans has been a great resource to myself, to our nurse leader, to the town. He's overseeing the whole town's, helping coordinate the town's COVID vaccination project. So he's well versed in it, and I used a quote from him, in the letter I sent home on over the weekend to some folks that, in his mind, schools are the safest place for our students and staff to be. So we're trying to do what we can to get them back into that safe place.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Brady. Mr. Greer?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a different approach. I'm declaring shenanigans on the presentation. So a lot of the stuff in there was misrepresented and it was out of line with the findings of the Facilities and Operations Group. So the problem statement that we defined was not, can we get our kids back in, but how do we get our kids back in? And the reason we arrived at that is because we provide a service to the students and the parents and the other members of this community. And the voice of the customer has said to us, we want this service provided, right? So this isn't a big deal. All they're asking for is a service. We provide the service. Should they choose to use it, they're going to use it. Should they choose to use the remote option, they're going to use the remote option. So when we came up with our timeline, and even in our conversations last week, we've had this plan for about 3 weeks now, Tom. Is that correct? And we set a date of the 25th of January. And I find this timeline of February, March, April totally unacceptable, right? So now we started with this 25 January date, and we've marched this out to April. So you know, it's not what the people have asked for, right? We're coming up with more and more excuses why we can't provide this service for the people. I keep hearing CDC recommendations. That's all they are, is recommendations. The CDC does not mandate anything, right? We go by DESE. DESE has said 3 feet. That's all we're bound to do. So should the parents choose to send their kids back to school knowing that, they can do that. They're asking for that service. If they choose not to, then they can go full remote. Now, as far as if a kid is quarantined, that's back in school full time, I mean, I'm on almost daily meetings with people from India, Tokyo, parts of China, Brazil, as well as people in the room with me, and we all manage to get by. This isn't rocket science, you know. And I find it unacceptable that we're coming up with timelines like this, and that we're penalizing the least susceptible members of our community, right? If you look at the stats, how many deaths, how many hospitalizations for kids under 18, 19, 20 years old, right? And not to say this isn't a serious thing, but you know, the community's asking us to provide the service. Let's provide it. Now, as far as the teachers go, they can be at 6 feet, right? I don't want to hear another word about teachers demanding student distances. Right? We're setting up a safe work environment for them. They're exposed to all of these students at some point during the week, right? So the argument's out the window. They chose to go back into the workplace. So, you know, the teachers that want to teach, show up and teach. The students, will fit them in as best we can. We'll maintain safe distances for the teachers, and we'll maintain the distances within the DESE guidelines for the students. Right? I'm sick of people dragging their feet on this. We've had this plan for 3 weeks. Make it happen. That's all I have to say.
Okay, Mr. Greer, thank you. And want to just add, I get the frustration. I think, you know, you and I have had conversations where I want to see it happen as quickly as possible as well. I do want to say that, you know, it's our job to listen to what the parents and students want, and then it's our job to make sure that we implement it safely, which I know you understand and agree with. So that's, I think, the goal here, and that's why earlier when Mr. Granatino was speaking, I did ask about the possibility of, you know, having things ready earlier. So I get it, I understand, but would like to turn it over to the rest of the committee if anybody has anything else to add, because I know that that's a lot to absorb, but so, and yourself included in that, Mr. Greer, is after another couple comments from Mr. Granatino and Mr. Miller, if appropriate, turn it back over to the committee for one more round of statements. But again, I understand the frustration, but I also understand where the administration's coming from and wanting to do this safely and in a way that's not impacting how we're educating students system-wide. So it's not turning into just a massive headache for everyone. Would impact the quality of education for the students.
I gotta hop in again, and I didn't intend for my comments to be rebutted or refuted. With all due respect, I mean, This is just for this conversation. It's not personal.
Sure. No.
You know, safety, we're not in the business of determining safety. OSHA is, DESI is, other state agencies are. So they set the guidelines and we operate within those guidelines. To the best of our knowledge, we are operating safely. I see there's a lot of people that are involved with this that are interjecting artificial constraints on what we're trying to do. They're interjecting their emotions and their opinions instead of just going by the recommendations of the Facilities and Operations Group, right? We put a lot of time and effort into this, and we came up with a recommendation. And what I saw tonight was a misrepresented version of our recommendations. It just, you know, the people in this community are asking for the service, provide it. You know, we as a school committee should be charging the superintendent with carrying out our recommendation, right? So what has been happening over the past 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? We had 2 weeks off from school. We had plenty of time to get things in order and figure things out, right? There's no reason we're pushing, you know, seniors out till the 1st of March. That's just totally unacceptable. So they're going to go to school for a month?
No, they're going to school right now.
No, I'm talking about full time. The kids want to be back in school. I hear from a lot of students, they want to be there, right? It's just like, from my, you know, I understand you know, the superintendent reports to the committee, not any individuals on the committee as a whole. But I would urge the committee to say, make it happen now. No more excuses. And then you can tell your people to make it happen. Like if these people aren't on board to be part of the solution, they're part of the problem. We need different people involved with making the solution happen. It's that simple. They may be very good at their jobs, but the people that are being obstacles are not very good in this effort, right? So let's get the right people in there and make this happen soon.
So before I turn it on over to you to answer any question or whatever, you know, not just your statement, Mr. Greer, but any other questions or comments that may have come up throughout the conversation, I will say just very quickly, you know, due respect to you, and I know that you didn't intend things to be rebutted, but that's the job of the committee here, is to have the conversation. Is unfortunately, DESI did put this on us to look after the health of students, and that's been a complaint, I think, of everybody here, that DESI didn't make a decision early enough or wide-ranging enough and put it on each and every district to make a decision of how their public education would look. You know, we have to consult regularly with the Board of Health. We have to keep an eye on those things. That is under the purview of the superintendent and the administration. Again, I don't think anybody on the committee disagrees that we need to make sure that we're going back to in-person full instruction as soon as possible. But the key words there is as soon as possible. And that's what I'd like to hear from the administration on. That's what this presentation was for. Your comments on the faithfulness to the original recommendations are noted, and I'm sure they're noted from the rest of the committee. And I think I hope that the conversation that we have here tonight is one that will show that we're all kind of closer on this than we think we are, at least from the tone of the discussion. So I appreciate the comments, and we'll turn it on over to Mr. Granatino for any closing thoughts. And again, if any members of the committee, yourself included, have anything to add, we can certainly do that. Mr. Granatino, go ahead.
Thank you, and Mr. Greer and all the members. I respect and totally get where you're coming from. We want to get students back in like everybody else and get them back in fully in person. I think every parent would love that. I think every student would love that. And when we can do it appropriately, we want to do that. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm coming up with an excuse. And we talked at the last meeting, and there had been, you know, things done within the presentation at the last time when we were together, where dates had been taken out, and we were looking at, you know, dates to be determined. And I'm looking at right now, how do we get all students back into school? This is at the high school. This is the solution that was talked about, operating within state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distance for teachers, date to be determined. So we're, you know, if we can do it earlier than March 1st, I'd love to do it. We talked about at the end, the 3 different recommendations that came from the task force. And again, getting all grades back in at elementary 6 feet distance full-time, initially 4 days a week. Middle school, return to 6th grades 6 to 8 in phased approach, operating within state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distancing for teachers. And then returning all students operating within state guidelines while maintaining 6 feet distancing for teachers at a date to be determined at the high school. So there were no dates set. I know we talked, and ideally we were originally talking about the transition of the new semester, and that would make the sense for almost everything. But we do have, and it's not looked at as an excuse, we do have expectations that we have agreed to utilize right now as far as distancing. And it's written within the presentation from the previous meeting from the task force that, that 6 feet distancing is something that we need to try to adhere to. I mean, I'm reading from it right now. And I know at the high school and middle school is more about the teacher being 6 feet distance, but it also did not give any type of specific date. It's date to be determined. So if the committee feels that we can go sooner, and we'll continue to work to try to make that sooner, but right now we know that at the distancing that we have agreed to, and again, if we change it, it has to be based on the information I shared with you. If we can do that and fit them in, we'll get them in sooner than March 1st. But right now, we know that we can do it sooner with the elementary, and we figured that would be the first approach. And again, that is not an approach that's out of the norm. That is what most districts, if any districts are coming back in person, they're starting K-2, 3-5, or K-5, and then they're trying to move up into the secondary levels. And right now, with what we have, that distancing is going to be a problem that we have to work on. And I have no problem working on it, but to say that we could bring them back sooner would be a challenge. But we'll continue to work on it. And if we can get them back sooner than March 1st or March 15th or April 1st for some of the other levels, we will do that. I mean, there are some districts that are doing nothing until vaccines come out as far as bringing students back. And we're not looking to do that at all. But that's just an approach. Every town does it a little differently. But based on what we have here, as far as, expectations already in place that we would have to adjust, that's part of the process, and we'll gladly do that and work towards that. But right now, we know we can do something with the elementary level sooner than the other levels. And if we can get the secondary back in with acceptable, distancing and make it work from transportation and lunch and all that kind of stuff, which I know we can do, we'll get them in sooner and get the seniors in the first phase of that.
Yeah, I got to hop in again. I'm not going to let this go.
Sure thing, Mr. Greer. Go ahead.
I don't want to hear 6 feet again, except for teachers, right? We have state guidelines. They've said that's safe for students. We have 3 feet on the bus. Then we have this artificial mandatory 6 feet that's being imposed in the classrooms, 6 feet at lunch with masks off, right? At some point, it just stop. The DESE says 3 feet. So we targeted 6 feet, right? We can't do it. Go down to 5. You could, if you had 5 rows of seats and you brought everyone in a foot, you're adding another whole row of seats. It doesn't make sense to keep dragging this out. Get the seniors back in. There's no reason they can't go back in Monday. We've had 3 weeks to prepare for this, or if not more. Right? You've had all the Christmas vacation and then the 2 weeks off. It's not hard to have a Zoom meeting with a bunch of people in person and then a bunch of people on Zoom. I do it several times a week. Again, it's not rocket science. So I don't know why we're dragging our feet on this. And it's the voice of the customer that's dictating this. We're not mandating kids going back to school. They have 1 of 2 options, full remote, or they can go back full return, right? It's up to the parents which option they want to take. So it seems like we're way overthinking this and putting too much effort into not making progress. That's how it appears to me. That's how it appears to a lot of people that have reached out to me. So, I'm not going to let this go to March 1st. There's no reason those seniors can't be. Obviously, it's not going to happen Monday. Why can't it happen the week after?
So, and if I could jump in here, Mr. Greer, and actually maybe shock you a little bit and agree with you I mean, obviously there's certain things that you and I differ on slightly, but when it comes to this, unless we see specific data that suggests that it's not safe for high school seniors to go back with that kind of transmission rate, the low transmission rate combined with the 39.4 or whatever it is percentage, unless we have an opinion from a medical professional that says that we should wait for that to go down a little bit, which I don't know if it's possible for the transmission rate to go down at this point. I know logistically it's difficult, at least from your perspective as the leader of the district, handling 2 separate levels coming back around the same time. But I would agree with Mr. Greer that if there is a way to bring high school seniors back sooner than the 1st of March, I'd be in favor of that as long as it's done safely. And I know you would be too.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I agree. Yeah. Pardon?
So at least that's my feeling. And obviously this has opened a whole other flow of the conversation. So I want to get the rest of the committee's thoughts on it as well. And I see both Ms. Campbell and Ms. Brait have unmuted themselves. Ms. Campbell, if it's okay with you, I'm going to start with Ms. Brait since she was also on that task force.
Yep.
So Ms. Brait, I'll go ahead and recognize you.
Sure. So I'll make this brief. And Mr. Greer, this is in no way an attempt to rebut your comments, because as members of this committee, we are all entitled to our own opinions and thoughts. And that's what makes us a great team, is that we're all different and come from different perspectives. And a lot of times we end up right where we should be. I'd like to say that most of the time as a group, we all end up, making the best decision for the kids. I agree with the high school senior thing. I'd like to see them come back. With that being said, I know that there are a lot of parents that really feel like their kids need to be back in school. And I don't want people to feel like we're favoring one group over another because of certain things, because everyone's concerns are important. And I think that it's important to highlight that the members of this committee, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I am going to reference all of you, we're elected by the people. And the people that elected us are not just students. We have teachers that live in Marshfield. We have first responders. We have, all different types of people. And these are people that don't even have kids in school. If you look at the voting records, elderly people vote the most. Just so, it's when you say that the people, this is what the people want. Well, it's probably like half the people, and half the people want one thing and half the people want another. And as our job as elected people, we need to, weigh all of our options and make the best decision, the best decision we know how. And as Mr. Granatino said, the dates in that presentation are not final. And I would agree that we should be on track to move faster if we can. And I would suggest that as the 2 school committee members on that facilities committee, that you and I discuss this offline, and we could possibly make recommendations to change those dates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brait. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm sorry, Mr. Granatino, did you want to reply to that quickly, or should I go to Ms. Campbell?
I'm sorry.
Did you want to reply to that, or did you want me to go?
No,
to
I appreciate Ms. Brait's comments, and I don't disagree with where she's coming from. And if we can, do things in a more expeditious fashion, by all means, we'll try to do that. But
great, thank you. And Ms. Brait, I think you hit the nail on the head with how you opened your statements there, and just want to back up your positivity there and say that I'm sure we will end up in the right place. Ms. Campbell, go right ahead.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. One, to kind of piggyback on what Mrs. Brait was saying, I think, at least from my perspective, again, not wanting to speak for anybody else, I think what has made this so hard is that the people, meaning all of the people that we hear from, mostly parents, are not all on the same page, right? So that's what makes it really hard when you have half of parents want this and half of parents want this and some want something in the middle. It makes our job harder because we want to do what we were elected to do for our parents and our students and our community members. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that point, that all of the people that have reached out to us are not all on the same page, at least from my perspective. The other thing I think it's important to note is that there wasn't just one task force that was working to look at bringing kids back. There was also a teaching and learning task force for elementary school and high school that maybe wasn't on the exact same page and time frame as the buildings and facilities task force. And so, it wasn't just that group that was tasked to make this decision. It was lots of other people coming together. And And then lastly, I will just be very direct, and Mr. Greer, I'm sorry, but your comments about teachers, I found to be highly disrespectful in saying if they don't want to come in, we'll get new ones. Our teachers are working so hard, and I think to make dismissive comments about them right now is just not appropriate. Without our teachers, we don't have an in-person school and we don't have a remote school. Like, I just don't think that's appropriate. I think our teachers deserve all the respect. And I also, saying you never want to hear 6 feet again, it's going to be part of the vernacular in, you know, the entire country for however many more months COVID is going on. So I don't know. I don't know.
I'm going to speak to this.
Well, hold on. I'm just going to say, Mr. Granatino, just going in the process that I've been going, and then I'll recognize another member of the committee. So go ahead, Mr. Granatino, if you had anything you'd like to add to Ms.
No,
Campbell's.
I didn't have anything to add. I agree with what Ms. Campbell is saying, and I appreciate her thoughts, just like all the members.
Thank you, Mr. Granatino. Mr. Greer.
Okay, so I'm going to direct this to Ms. Campbell. I know you like to disagree with me when I quote policy, and you just misrepresented what I said. I didn't say would we replace the teachers. By no means did I even allude to that. I'm talking about the administration working on setting up the building and the folks working on getting everything in place to get the students back in. If they're not the right folks to make this happen, get the right people in there to make it happen. By no means was I saying remove them from our system, right? You have people working on an effort. You get the right people in there to make it happen as expeditiously as possible. That's all I was saying. By no means was I talking about eliminating positions, removing teachers. You know, my father was a teacher, right? You know, I have the utmost respect for teachers, and that was by no means directed at teachers, you know, and I appreciate you strongly disagreeing with me once again in the middle of a meeting. You know, if you have an issue, we can take it aside and discuss it. You don't need to do it on television.
I don't believe Mr. Granatino will have anything to add to that, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over now to Ms. Boyd, who I see has unmuted. Go ahead, Ms. Boyd.
I have just a question about whether or not our full remote program would have the capacity to handle additional students that might not want to come back full in person. Like, would that still be an option for families as it is currently?
The state has not said that if we were to go fully in person, that we were to get rid of our alternate remote program this year. We would continue with it at the elementary level. There's room for numbers to grow. It would be additional licensing that we would have to purchase, most likely to make, if we added students at the secondary level, our 6 through 12 program. But again, elementary wise, we have space available. Now, if we lost dozens and dozens of students, that might be an issue. We might have to get more staff again to make the remote program work. We've spent about $1.4 million to staff that and to staff the positions that were backfilled back in the classroom. So there will be could be some cost if there's a large number, but right now we could make it work if there was a handful of people at each level that was to transfer back over there. They would still have to give them that option.
But they would still have the option
Yes.
if they wanted.
I haven't heard otherwise from the state,
Right.
so I don't think we would.
That's it.
Thank you. I believe the discussion has reached a point where we can move forward. I do want to just get from the committee, maybe not so much a vote on the entire proposal, but at least some sort of consent to Mr. Granatino and his team to pursue this. So I certainly am in favor of it, and am in favor of the timeline happening as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know there seems to be some contention on what we believe is defining as soon as possible, but I know you'll keep us updated on that, and I know you'll sense the urgency that the committee is bringing to the table here, and I think that's what we are all in agreement on. And again, would harken back to Ms. Brait's statement earlier about how we will all get there together, and just want to say that I've got full faith in the administration, and I know the rest of the committee has faith in this administration as well to make it happen. And yourself, Mr. Granatino, that's why you're here. There's nobody else I'd rather have leading that charge. I know you sense the urgency.
No, I do, and I don't take offense if folks want me to be doing something differently. That's what your role is. You folks are here to give me charges to try to carry through on. Again, without any dates at the last meeting, we were asked to come up with a draft schedule. So this is draft. I knew from the get-go that these numbers are flexible and that we can try to do that. If we can do them sooner, we will do them sooner. But there had been no initial dates set in the plan that was presented, and we're trying to do what we think is appropriate. And if we can do it quicker, by all means, we will do that. And by the next meeting, if not sooner than that, if we have new information to share with the committee, we will have it to present at that time. And if we can get folks in here, sooner than the time frame that we're looking at, we will try to do that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Granatino. Very much appreciated. Unless any other member of the committee has anything pressing to add to this, I'm going to move on to the last item on our agenda, which is the discussion of the minutes. And we have two sets of minutes to review there, one being from January 5th and the other being from last week, January 11th. And once folks have a moment to review those, I would accept a motion to approve the January 5th, 2021 meeting minutes. So moved from Mr. Greer. Is there a second on the floor?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, that's a 5-0-0. Same deal, folks, for the January 11th, 2021 meeting minutes. Give you folks a moment to review those. And again, the chair would accept a motion to approve the January 11th, 2021 meeting minutes as written.
So moved.
So moved.
From Mr. Greer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand, saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That's a 5-0-0. Okay, folks, we have another meeting coming up in 2 weeks, but Mr. Granatino would like to note that I have breached the topic with the other members of the committee, and all 5 of us, for at least the next meeting as a trial basis, would be comfortable moving it to 6 p.m. As we are all in a COVID world, and that just gets us out a little earlier. Still same amount of time devoted to the meeting, but just a little bit earlier of a release. So 6 p.m. will be our next meeting time. Very much appreciate the discussion tonight. If there's a motion to adjourn the meeting, that motion will be accepted. So moved from Mr. Greer. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Boyd. That is a roll call. Mrs. Pazerski.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Ms. Boyd, Mrs. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Sprague.
Yes.
Thank you very much, folks.